time, and on the drive here, we were actually trying to pinpoint the year we met, but we still haven't figured that one out. It's been that long ago. So Saba Gul Khattak is, at the moment, an independent researcher. She has a PhD in political science from the University of Hawaii, and she's been working on gender and conflict issues for a very long time. She's the former executive director of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Pakistan, which is a very big think tank. And I think, if I remember right, the first woman to head up SDPI ever, right? I think. Yeah. and has done a lot of policy work in terms of SDPI. And then after that, she went and became a member of the Planning Commission for the government of Pakistan and worked there in the social sector and really pushing for social protection programs in the country. So it has had impact both at the NGO and the policy level in the government. But we actually met somewhere in the late 1990s when I was doing a project on subcontracted workers in 5 countries. And I'd gone to Pakistan to try to kind of meet people to have partners to work with. And it really was that I met Saba, I think, for 3 minutes and realized that this was the person I was going to work with. And so we worked together for several years on this project, which eventually ended up in a book called The Hidden Assembly Line that I edited. And if you haven't read it, Saba's chapter in that book, I think, is one of the most interesting chapters on labor, gender, and capitalism that I've read, and I continue to teach her chapter more than anything I've written in that book. So she has a huge amount of writing and research and thinking, and one of the more interesting thinkers that I've met in my life. So I'm really excited that we have Saba here and going to talk about one of the more complicated regions in the world for us to understand. Saba?
Thanks. Radhika gave a flattering introduction. I am just grateful that you all come here for this presentation. This is work in progress, so I look forward to your feedback. I just thought I'll try and explain a little bit about what Pakistan is and the context of Swat. Most of you have probably read about it or about Malala Yousafzai, so Swat is perhaps a little familiar. I also have lots of photographs that I wanted to share. The quality may not be the best because my friend and I, we were in Swat. We are doing the work together. This is collaborative work. But the presentation on militarization, women and security is something that I'm doing. Here's a map of Pakistan. Basically, Swat is, I thought I'd be able to point out, but you know where the fuchsia color is, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the north over there. And you can just sort of get an idea of how Pakistan is located, with India on one side, Afghanistan on the other, Iran, China. This is a photograph we just sort of took of Swat. It's mountainous, it's very pretty. I'm sorry the photography is not too great here. It was done with a phone camera. This gives you some idea of, again, the Swat Valley. I just thought I'll talk about a little bit about what the Swat conflict has been. Basically, in Pakistan, you know, a lot of many of the conflicts, some of course predate the Afghan jihad that started in 1980. But the conflict in Swat, as well as on the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan in a place called Fata, both in their current context are connected with the Afghan jihad. In Swat, the rise of Sufi Muhammad, who was actually part of a religious right-wing political party, the Jamaat Islami, and broke away from them, He's from a district. We have what you have states here. In Pakistan, we have districts. So they are administrative units within provinces. Sufi Muhammad is not really from Swat, he's from a neighboring district, but he started a movement over there around the time that the Mujahideen took over Kabul. In the late 80s, 1990, he started the TSNM, Tehreek-e-Nifaz-e-Shariati, Shariat Muhammadi. TSNM basically was saying we want Islam. Of course, Pakistan itself says it's an Islamic republic, but this man was sort of not satisfied and felt, the country was not Islamized enough. So that movement started. So I just wanted to make the connection because, the rise of a lot of it was there, of course, before also, but with the Afghan jihad, they got more funds and the spaces opened up for them to speak about Islam and how that is the bulwark against communism and the Russians, because that's the context of the Cold War. So there was a lot of support internationally for these ideas. And so it doesn't start suddenly, it has, the roots are way back at that time. Post 9/11, when the 9/11 took place and later the bombing of Afghanistan took place, Sufi Muhammad, who had started the movement in Swat and Malakand, the overall region is called Malakand Division, he went to Afghanistan, took some volunteers with him and said, this is horrendous stuff going on, we have to go fight the jihad. Many of the people disappeared, some died, he came back, people were demanding the families, where are our relatives, the boys you took, he didn't know. He was put into prison, but what the government called protective custody, because the people of Swat and Dill would have lynched him, and his son-in-law Fazlullah. Fazlullah came out of jail 17 months later and started with his own Tehreek-e-Taliban and became the head of the Swat chapter of Taliban. So Fazlullah then becomes the Swat leader and slowly starts to build his own image, collects money from people, says he's going to bring real peace in Swat, and was actually very popular, very, very popular with the women because they felt he started an FM radio on which you talk about, what a good Muslim should be, and if there's anything wrong, then people should report to him and his group, and they will sort things out. So nothing was lost. There were no robberies or kidnappings or the usual social evils. Women were so happy. He told women they should tell their husbands to pray 5 times a day, have beards. And so that also gave women a sense of agency and empowerment, that for once they could go and tell the men what to do rather than have the men tell them what to do and how to live their lives. So he was hugely popular with women because of the FM radio. And slowly sort of started to have more and more control, had massive funds also, women would voluntarily contribute to his cause. However, things started to get worse, and I'll get into that. However, between 2007 and 9, Fazlullah virtually had control over Swat, administrative control, and eventually there was a military operation against him because he started to sort of challenge everything. And there was massive displacement out of Swat. 1.5 million or more people were displaced, had to leave the area because there was literally street fighting, and eventually came back, but then there were devastating floods that again caused massive displacement. So the people of Swat, I just wanted to give you this overall context and background about what people have had to go through. And then in 2013, when I was in Swat actually, and on my way back, we found out that Fazlullah has now been appointed the head of the Taliban overall. So you can just imagine how the people of Swat now feel, because in between was a rule of terror in Swat. And I'll just go to a little bit of that to here are some of the sermons. He started to tell the police to quit because they would otherwise be targeted. So that was his, on the FM radio, these announcements would come, and then actually the targeting would take place. And similarly, people would be told to take their daughters out of school, and actually in the mosques, they would, whoever would take out his daughter out of school, he would be congratulated, and everyone would say, oh, now you're going to go to paradise because you're being a good Muslim, taking your daughter out of this secular education, so on. So, I will not read out this, but you get a sense of what was going on. Women, of course, also came under attack. I mean, women who were his biggest supporters, slowly, it started to build up. How he looked at what women, police women, and I've just given a few names, but this is how the build-up takes place. For instance, Alia was kidnapped and then killed in 2008 because she continued to work as a policewoman in Swat, and because women were told to quit their jobs, policemen were also told to quit. But so they started to be targeted. Then there were these two beggars who were brutally murdered. They were very poor women. One was a widow, the other one was her daughter, had no means of livelihood, would beg. They were told to stop begging, but because they continued to beg, they were brutally killed. Similarly, a lady health worker, this is actually, I know this is a women's studies program, but this is a massive primary health program where the women workers are called the lady health workers. They were told, and this is basically forms the backbone of the health program in Pakistan. Each district has these health workers. They were gunned down. They were told that you are, prostitutes, condom carrying women, because they were trying to promote family planning, vaccination, so they were accused of being very un-Islamic, started to be targeted for continuing to go and do their jobs. And many times the men in the family would resist and because many of the Taliban were local people, they would say, who are you to tell me whether my wife or daughter should go and work or not work. So there were local clashes, but then the killings would start to take place. So there was an atmosphere of intimidation. Lady councillors, women councillors, the local government representatives were ordered to quit, and those who did not were again killed. Sometimes their bodies would be stuffed into bags. Sometimes they'd just be left on the roadside with a note saying no one can come and touch the body for 2 days, so people would have that fear instilled in their minds. Music, of course, was banned because that was considered the worst possible thing. Both male musicians and females were told, and Swat is known for its music locally in the province, for the singing and the music that is produced there. CD shops with music and films, they used to get burnt. This was a woman, Shabana, who was a famous singer in Swat. She was actually killed for indulging in un-Islamic acts. And her dying, when they came after her, she told them that I know you are going to kill me, but please do not dismember my body. So in the end, for women and the people of Swat, it became not a negotiation to live, but a negotiation over how you are going to die. So I just sort of thought I needed to show it to you, like with the photographs. I've talked about the CD shops, then schools were being blown up. You probably would read about these issues, but like I'm saying again and again, I'm trying to show you how the build-up took place and how all the people suffered through this. It wasn't only the women. Schools, both for for boys and girls, were blown up, but girls' schools were far greater in number. The government buildings, there was like banks, the government national banks, they would be blown up, family planning centers, the Swat Museum was blown up because there's an attack on culture as well. In Afghanistan we had seen similar stuff with the Bumyam Buddhas. Swat again was and is a heritage site because there's a lot of Buddhist ruins in Swat and pre-Buddhist as well. So Swat Museum had a lot of the cultural heritage which was destroyed by the Taliban, policemen killed. I've talked about the public hangings, what is now called Green Square, was called Khuni Chowk, bloody, like blood was flowing there. People were publicly hanged. This was the center of the main town, Mingora city. And people could not do much. Then what turned the tide was a young woman who was publicly flogged, Chand Bibi, and that really turned the opinion everywhere. I mean, there was the build-up and people were getting outraged daily, but this public flogging of a young girl accused of being with her fiancé, whereas it was just a boy who was related to them, who had gone to her house to fix some electricity, but because a Talib, a boy from the Taliban, liked her, he accused her of, immoral activities, had them both brought out, flogged publicly, and that someone made a video which was then shown on television networks, and the whole country was outraged by that. How could this happen? And that sort of, the public support for the Taliban had decreased because they were ruling through fear, sheer fear. So by 2009, when the army started its operation to remove the Taliban, actually the displacement took place. There was fear, but there was also, after the army succeeded, there was a sense of relief also that the Taliban had been removed. It's a picture of the displacement, how people were leaving their homes. There was no time. There used to be curfews. People did not know the word curfew in Pashto. So initially they didn't know that they had to sort of go inside. People, the small vendors and so on wouldn't know. All of that used to affect life. I also took some pictures of the narrow streets because in the end with the Taliban there was street-to-street fighting, and you can tell how difficult it must have been because they would go inside houses. And so, there were areas that were dominated by the Taliban. Another view of a narrow street. Most of the streets are like this. This is sort of another view of how, it's a mountainous area. Then can you see the green flag? This is actually the houses, and then there is a graveyard in front, and there were many fresh graves because of the fighting that had taken place. So it's actually, when you go there, it really hits you. And then you see those Pakistan flags, the green flag, which means this is now military presence is there. That was the military's way of saying, here, this is our stamp, we are here now, this is not a Taliban area. So I just sort of felt I needed to. We took these pictures in different places. So the army is there. It is ensuring, that there is some semblance of security. But at the same time, of course, there were checkposts on most roads to check people if there are Taliban going by or not. So there would be long queues. Eventually, people started to resent the checkposts. But this was something that was necessary initially. And then there was the post-conflict and post-disaster roles of the military. I want to get to the whole issue of militarization as well. In the floods context also, the military played a crucial role because the civilian structures of government had basically disintegrated during those 2 years of Taliban rule and terror. So when the floods came, the military had to also deal with that. And so you find that the army is taking on roles that traditionally are not there for the military to perform, except initially during the first stage. The army, because of the security situation, started to tell people who can go there and who cannot, and so NOCs are something no objection certificate. So if I want to go to Swat and do research, I need permission from the military that would allow me to go and issue me a no objection certificate before I can go and conduct any kind of a survey. I was doing qualitative work. I did not apply for an NOC, but I was warned that I was doing something that would put me at risk. But here is the army deciding who can come in, who cannot, who can work in Swat, who cannot work in Swat. Development role, I'll show you some more pictures as well as the cultural preservation context and women. Let's just get to all these issues that I wanted to talk about. Here's a school, one of sort of the landmark schools, one of the first schools. That actually the building was fine after the fighting that took place in Swat, but according to the men in Swat, the army pulled it down, and so you can see the green flag on this side and a UAE flag on the other side to indicate this was rebuilt with money from the UAE government and the Pakistan army. You have more boards indicating the same. Here's our army chief and one of the sheikhs, Arab sheikhs who had come, who also gave a lot of money and funds, but then the army was in charge of implementation. You may not be able to read the Urdu part, but the English says it. It's a library, a gift from the Pakistan army, rebuilt by the army, the same library. Just here's something that says Government Girls High School, Fazalabad, which is Kanju. Kanju was an area that was under Taliban control, and it says Pak Army, a gift of the Pakistan Army. So a girls' high school that was rebuilt, but the Pakistan Army keeps saying it is our gift to the people of Swat. Pakistan, again, another girls' high school. And I want to come to the politics of this. Again, the same thing, another girls' high school that says a gift of the Pakistan Army for rebuilding it. You can tell it's a sort of like a relatively new construction. This is the Swat Museum. Now, what is not really visible are the soldiers, and there's this cannon that I hope you can see, and of course the barbed wire. We tried to capture the soldiers who were trying to go away, and sort of we were taking the photographs. I don't know if you can spot them. There was one standing here. I'm sorry, this is not very good, but it's the presence, physical presence of the military as well. So, and of course that shows you how the whole place was destroyed, and then the presence of the army. This is just another view of Swat. So basically, I just wanted you to get an idea of how the military is now present in many different ways in Swat, not just manning the checkposts on the roads, but and because the police had been targeted and police stations had been blown up, the police was also barely there when the army came, so the army took on policing functions as well. Now, the army, of course, saw itself, and the people also saw themselves, saw the army as the big protector and the one organization that came and rescued the people of Swat. The dilemmas are, of course, one is the changing perceptions, and that's to do with time. Initially, the army was very popular, but 3-4 years down the line, it is not as popular because now people say it needs to go. But the army is not willing to go anymore because it still feels, and some people still feel, the Taliban threat is there, especially after Fazlullah became the head of the entire, the Pakistani Taliban. So that's one aspect of the military's presence. And then the military sort of assigning itself this role of being the protector. So soldiers would be ensuring that polio drops are given to the children because the health program had been under attack. And then you have like the schools being rebuilt by the army. But it didn't stop at that. The army was also in charge of local government, local administration. So the army officers would inform women who were told that they cannot go for their jobs. The army was actually encouraging women to come and work, whether they were teachers or lady health workers or working in factories or in NGOs or in parlors, beauty parlors,